Today we have with us Professor AK Ramakrishnan, one of the major voices from India in international affairs and especially West Asian studies. Professor Ramakrishnan, who does not need any introduction, and he's been part of Indian academics for more than almost 4 decades, and he retired from JNU recently. Welcome to Timeline Conversations, Professor. So when it comes to international affairs and West Asian studies, the major issue everyone is looking at currently is Gaza and all the statements US President Donald Trump is making. So he is planning to create a different kind of a city in Gaza, and he is threatening entire West Asia. Why he is doing that, and what is he going to be successful in his plan?
You know, Trump is basically a real estate businessman. And his Middle East envoy, Witkoff, is also a real estate businessman. So when Trump sees Gaza with all the ruined buildings, etc., the immediate urge is to just to make the land clear everything and construct. He doesn't mind about the people. That's not his concern.
Yes.
You know, this is similar to the late 19th century European Zionists who looked at Palestine as a land without people, for a people without land. You know, that Zionist slogan, we remember. It's not that those European Jewish leaders did not know that there are people in Palestine. They know very well there are people, but it doesn't matter. So they can treat it as a people without land.
Yes.
Trump is, in a way, reminding us of the same mentality that the Palestinians do not matter. And his vision of this kind of a land facing the sea is for creating a Riviera, as he said, in a seaside resort kind of thing, by sending all the Palestinians to Egypt or Jordan or Saudi Arabia, wherever he can. But he is terribly mistaken, I think, because, you know, through the whole last 1 century's process of colonizing Palestine and the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, and then capturing all of historical Palestine in 1967 war. What Israel was thinking about was to send the Palestinians out, as they did in 1948 in the historical Palestine, which became Israel. So they thought that that can be done in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem and so on and so forth. They were not successful until now to send all Palestinians out of all these lands of Palestine. So if Trump, with 1 century's work, that was not possible, with all the American assistance that they've got. So if Trump thinks that he can do that with the Palestinian people now, is mistaken, because for Palestinians, their relationship with their land is something very unique. Because every inch of land is important, because everything is occupied. They lost so much in 1948, and therefore they consider land as something that is very precious to their very identity and existence. So I don't think he can be successful in that.
But there are arguments, especially pro-Israeli writers and thinkers. And I came across one article by Satanand Thume yesterday, and he was equating the same with India's partition and whatever happened with the Soviet Union, where people left. So he was saying that if they can do that for the sake of the peace process in Middle East, forgetting all what the Israeli occupation or Israeli aggression is doing, they were not just Dume, many others arguing that, okay, this is a possible idea. Is it a possible thing? Like, well, you just shift the people from one area to other area?
This whole point of establishing a Palestinian entity in Jordan was an old American idea. Okay, that's nothing new. And because Egypt and Jordan receives a whole lot of American aid, military aid for Egypt, that's extremely significant. So Trump thinks that he can twist the arms of both the King of Jordan and Sisi's government. Saudi Arabia is a close friend of Trump, as you know. Trump's own son-in-law being involved in lots of investments, so on and so forth.
Gerard Kushner.
So, what we have seen historically is the Palestinians themselves finding the Arab governments as not very dependable,
Yeah.
to say the least, or the other way around also, because what happened in Jordan in the early 70s, the Black September, etc., violence against Palestinian refugees and so on and so forth. That's not the case with Arab people. They are with the Palestinians. But Arab governments, the very idea of Palestinian nationalism strengthening and becoming much more radical in the 1960s, especially after the 67 war, when the Palestinians thought that these Arab countries could not even protect their own lands. Israel occupied the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, the West Bank, again where Jordan had some say, and Golan Heights of Syria. Major Arab countries lost their lands. So they could not defend their own land, let alone liberating Palestine. So that is why Palestinians started taking things in their own hands. Until then, it was through the Arab League and some coordination with Arab countries that Palestinians were waging their struggle. But they became much more independent, having their own struggle, and so on and so forth. The fear that these Arab governments can come down and have some relations, give some concession to Trump. Whether Palestinians will do that, that's what I was mentioning. Kind of political thinking, their own Palestinian national liberation movement as such. The ideology of whether secular or Islamic Palestinian organizations, this is not at all an accepted idea.
All the things which happened after October 7, 2023, and then more than 50,000 people died, millions of people displaced, and then there was a ceasefire, and there are arguments that Hamas has been eliminated up to a level. About that argument, who won the war and who gained, and what was the end result of what happened in last 1.5 years?
Let us accept the reality that the Palestinians suffered a whole lot. The state of affairs of Gaza now, as we all know, to make it a much more livable area, it takes a long time. But in political negotiations, it is not that kind of a weakness of the Palestinians that you have seen. Even if the Hamas leadership, a large chunk of it, was eliminated by Israel. In the negotiations between Hamas and Israel, Hamas could secure an agreement on a 1:30 hostage deal. For one Israeli hostage being released, 30 Palestinian prisoners have to be released.
Yes.
That's not a bad deal in diplomatic terms, isn't it? In any deal making of that kind.
Yes.
And that doesn't seem to be a completely defeated organization dealing with a powerful military, dominated state like Israel. So there's something else going on, isn't it?
Yes.
Whether our understanding of the whole war, which was reported by Western media without any local correspondent for them, reporting from other capitals.
Yes.
So whether we were getting the actual picture of what was happening, And the situation of the Israeli hostages who were held and they were released, the kind of pictures we have seen, the kind of total destruction that Netanyahu was intending to do was somehow resisted. But Palestinians suffered such a heavy human
Yes.
and material loss that we should see. So one cannot say that this is a victory as such in that sense, considering the human loss.
Yes.
But at the diplomatic front, I think Israel, it could not assert the kind of, utterances that its leaders were making
Yes.
in global media.
Yes.
So there is a kind of saying that it's not a total military victory also, because they find that even now Hamas fighters are still there in Gaza.
So where is Gaza headed? Who is going to govern Gaza? Though Trump's demands are there, but what is going to happen with Gaza now? Because is it going to be as the second intifada or the first intifada? Gaza is coming back and they are building their own areas. Then again, Israeli aggression repeats. What is going to be the future?
Very difficult to predict like that. The problem, obviously, that has been there for quite some time now, that the Palestinian leadership as a whole, they don't have the PA, for example, the
Palestine.
Abbas leadership for that matter. Their behavior over the last several years have been seen by many Palestinians. I think a majority of the Palestinians as not helpful for the liberation of Palestine. Mahmoud Abbas and the PA was trying to Palestinian Authority they do not have even a municipal government's authority, and that's another case. They are trying to show that, Gaza also should come under the PA's control, and trying to negotiate with the United States, etc. At this point, even after Trump coming to power, there were those kinds of utterances from the PA. That argument has come from other Arab countries also. Neighboring countries also, Egypt and Jordan and others were also trying to do that. But I don't think Gazan people are very enthusiastic about that. But there were some attempts, sometimes under the Egyptian mediation itself, for negotiation between the PA leadership and Hamas. But that did not reach anywhere as we know. So politically, how the Gazans are going to be organizing themselves, because the Hamas is still there, its leadership, even the top leadership, is not there, but there are still people who can organize them. So what kind of negotiations that they are going to do for the future of Gaza, it's not very clear at this moment. Ideally, that Palestinian entity altogether, coming together and then waging that struggle would be an ideal thing. But whether that's going to happen, or much more encirclement of Gaza, more American assistance to Israel to do the intermittent bombing, and they are doing that in the West Bank now after Gaza.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed after the ceasefire. They continue their attack right now at West Bank.
At least there is some push from different organizations to have this kind of a dialogue and having a leadership. But there is also a popular pressure on the PA, its leadership, to be changed, because they are there because there are no elections. The PA wanted to postpone elections to the Palestinian Authority because they are sure that they are not going to be in those elections. So the first and foremost requirement for any political arrangement to arise is to have a unified Palestinian leadership, which has the mandate of the people, which has to go through an electoral democratic process as such.
When everything started, there was this allegation that what happened on October 7th was an Iranian plot. And after that, what we saw when the war progressed, Iran was attacked. Hamas leaders were killed in Iran, and Iran's strongest allies like Hezbollah and Houthis, not as exactly Houthis, but especially Hezbollah, they were suffering major setbacks. Even Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated. Some of your major works in your academic and other areas been about Iran, and Iran historically being a power in the entire human history. Where do you place Iran before and after the entire October 7th attack and also the end result? Where is Iran placed right now?
Again, the media impression that's given is Iran also lost terribly because its friends were outwitted by Israel and its attacks, like Hezbollah and Hamas and so on. But I don't think these are a kind of defeat for Iran in any major manner, except for that, the Palestinian leader was killed in Tehran. No, so whole idea of Iran as a country which is, these Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollahs, all Iranian proxies. That's the word that people use it.
Yeah.
As if the Lebanese or the Palestinians or the Yemenis do not have their own, ability to organize themselves. It's not to say that Iran is not assisting them.
Yes.
They're assisting them. But these movements are these particular people's movements and their organizations. And Hezbollah is a political party.
You're claiming that they are all independent
Yes,
entities.
they are entities formed for specific purposes. In the formation of Hezbollah, for example, the Iranian Revolution was an inspiration. And as a Shia community, that kind of Shia political, ideological assertions of Ayatollah Khomeini and others influenced the Lebanese Shias from South Lebanon. That's true. That was an inspiration. And there were assistances, material assistance as well. But Lebanese Hezbollahs are, not doing every work of the Iranian foreign policy requirement or anything of that sort. They are looking after their affairs and their confrontation with Israel because they are in the immediate neighborhood. And there's a tradition of Lebanon being invaded by Israel, 1982, for example. Israel's first military kind of defeat came from the hands of the Hezbollah, which, the IDF officers themselves, ultimately had to say that it was a military defeat. At the same time, this time they could have, an upper hand in defeating or at least eliminating some of the major leaders of Hezbollah. Whether Hezbollah is totally militarily defeated? No, we can't say that. And therefore, and with Hamas, the whole idea in American, foreign policy establishment and the media circles was that the whole point of a Shia crescent, so of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Hezbollah, and so on and so forth. So in their analysis, Hamas does not fit into that Shia crescent. But you are saying it's a proxy because these are people following Sunni tradition of Islam. So that logic doesn't work in that manner. The Houthis supporting the Palestinians in that difficult moment. The Yemeni people have a tradition of mobilizing people against imperialism, against colonialism. Until 1990, there was two countries, North Yemen and South Yemen. The People's Democratic Republic of Iran was led by Marxists. There were left movements in the whole of Arabian Peninsula in different parts. In Oman, there was people's movement for the liberation of Oman. The Arabian Peninsula has a whole history of people mobilizing themselves against imperialism, against monarchies. The Iranians also had that. The Iranian Revolution was a result against the monarchy of the Shah and against US imperialism. As political analysts, we should recognize the dignity and the requirement of people in the region, in different parts of the region, mobilizing their own energies to protect their interests. Countries like Iran support it. It's a support. They are not proxies doing every dirty work that the Iranian state want them to do. No, that's that's demeaning the Yemenis or the Lebanese or the Palestinians.
When it comes to West Asia, normally one party who makes lots of noise is Turkey. They were loud in their arguments against Israel, but when we see action, Turkey is nowhere. Turkey is also trying to, in my observation, they are trying to place themselves as the leaders of Muslims and against the Arab countries, or especially Saudi. What is Turkey is doing, and are they effective in the whole peace process in the West Asia?
Turkey's dealings with the United States, for example, who is the U.S. is a major party to the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict as such. Turkey is in a position where it does not want to totally alienate the American leadership, especially Trump, because Trump has a kind of ideological inclination towards Erdogan. As such, they have similar kind of attributes in terms of strong leadership, etc. And also Turkey as a member of the Western Alliance, as such, NATO.
Yes.
There's always that kind of say by the Americans in what Turkey does. Even though Turkey has tried to show its independence of action on matters of the West Asian and North African region, but that cannot go beyond a point because of this historical association with NATO and the Western Alliance in general, and with the United States. And Turkey has relationship with Israel, which is a dynamic relationship. Even though the rhetoric of Turkey may be there about Palestine, etc., this aspect also is restricting Turkey's ability to be a kind of honest broker in arriving at any kind of peace stage because of its relationship with both the Palestinians and the Israelis. It also has an advantage of dealing with both of them. But Turkey doesn't have that kind of an influence over the state of Israel. And therefore it cannot bring these two people into a negotiating table. Qatar could do that, at least on this ceasefire deal and the exchange of prisoners and hostages. But Turkey is not in a position to do that.
So moving from Gaza to the entire West Asian politics and society, so we see a change in entire Middle East, that Saudi is accepting some new ideas when it comes to gender and everything. What is the need for Saudi, like when it comes to women's freedom and women in sports advertisements and songs and everything, and especially in recent days? What is changing with Saudi Arabia these days?
Saudi women have been really agitating for more freedom in their everyday life, their freedom to move around. The whole Saudi women's struggle for the right to drive was a long movement. Ultimately, they won it even before all this liberalization of Saudi society that's happening under
MBS.
Under MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. So that is one major thing. What is called the youth bulge as such. And a huge younger population. And the whole question of their education, and after education, they are well educated, But the employment situation was not very good for them. So younger people were asking for more opportunities. Younger women were asking for more social freedoms for quite some time now. And the Saudi leadership were traditionally postponing these kinds of questions of reform. They were pushed to the background by many regimes. it has reached a point where that cannot be done anymore, especially with the internet world, with new avenues for people to interact with the rest of the world. The old kind of Saudi system, insulated from other kinds of development, is no more possible. And therefore, you can see some kind of social contract now working between the civil society and the rulers.
Yeah.
Because Saudi political leadership was traditionally, having all those roles. The role of an imam, rather than that kind of a protector of the holy places, the role of a sheikh, the tribal leadership role, and a malik, a king, as a secular ruling kind of thing. But now you cannot have that kind of a hierarchical political arrangement as in the past. So that is changing. Mohammed bin Salman, etc., is in a way representing that requirement for change in the royal family as such. Because earlier the royal family was the constituency through which the regime was conducting its affairs. That is no more possible. There's wider expansion, and the society is asking for its participation. So that negotiation between the civil society and the state is happening in a dynamic manner now. Saudi women, again, the problem with our view of these societies in general is that, these people are somehow totally subdued by patriarchy of the extreme kind and religious leadership of particular kind, etc. Again, denying the agency of Saudi women to determine their own affairs. They cannot do it fully with all freedoms because there are restrictions imposed on. But that does not mean that they do not seek to become active members of society and seek newer employments. So the fashion industry, for example, in Saudi Arabia, women business owners increasing exponentially in Saudi Arabia over the past few decades, for that matter. Women-owned businesses are, and that's something that has to be really, observed and studied how they do that. And so women's presence in various sectors of Saudi life, its economic life in particular, is a very significant thing to be noted. And their own struggle, they have defied the state several times, especially in freedom of movement, etc. So now you could see at least that, women's bodies as such, some of these regimes have that kind of obsession with women's body. How should they walk around? What should be their dress? And Iranian government has that. France has that. The French government is interested in that. They want to remove some of the clothes from women, etc. But these states are interested in how women conduct their own everyday life, etc. Which is not very good for any, society, because people should determine their affairs. So there is a dynamism of that kind having, and a new set of agendas are put to the forefront by women's groups, by civil society in general, by youngsters in the broad sense in Saudi society. So that change is almost inevitable.
When we talk about West Asia and Gaza, whether it's Gaza, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, or any other country, the central discussion in some forums mostly come across the discussion surrounding Islam. So you've been associated with studies surrounding Islam and Islamic societies for long. Where is Islam as an ideology or a belief system or an idea stands in between all the conflict, whether it's the gender or the political conflicts happening in Saudi or in Gaza or anywhere. Because the first question in social media or any other discussion forums, it comes up to, this is an Islamic problem. In India, when you go to X or Facebook or Instagram, people would say that these Muslims are like that, this is the Islam's problem. So when you look at the whole affairs, where is Islam in the whole discourse?
One major problem, and I think it is a kind of what we should call a kind of epistemic violence, violence with regard to knowledge as such, a kind of extreme, monolithic, generalized vision about Islam. If you have that kind of a totally monolithic view, that means that is the process through which an enemy is created. So traditional Orientalist discourses about Islam was along those lines. So you could attach them with the notion of the barbarians, the Europeans being the civilized. If the Europeans have to become civilized, you should create barbarians out there, isn't it? Then only they can become civilized. Otherwise, they cannot. So that kind of a discourse was happening. This is precisely what is happening, especially after September 11 developments, etc., of generalizing the Islamic world, and never, these journalists or even academic people in the universities, never giving credence to a very complex, dynamic history of Islam, its philosophical traditions, scientific traditions, very diverse ways in which Islam as a lived religion is working in various societies. West Asia is only a small part of the Muslim world. The larger part of the Muslim world in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Indonesia, Malaysia, here, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and so on. And Africa, many parts of Africa and so on. West Asia in population terms is only a small part of it. But when we talk about the Islamic world, it is West Asia that it comes to people. There is a point, because Islam was born there, and there's no doubt about it. But that's not the whole Islamic world. So Indonesian Islam, for example, Saudi Islam, Egyptian Islam, Iranian Islam,
Kerala Islam,
and Central Asian Islam, Kerala Islam, American Islam. Everything is put together. That monolithic view is precisely what was generated out of many attempts. Traditional Orientalism on the one hand, and notions like clash of civilizations, Huntington and others, that there is one Islamic kind of thing in opposition to Western civilization and those. What about Islamic contributions to Western civilization? Ibn Rushd, for example, whose works on Aristotle and Ibn Sina's work as well, Al-Farabi's work for that, but Ibn Rushd's work in particular from Islamic Spain. Those works, it was these Islamic thinkers that they were giving Europe a new interpretation of rationality. In Aristotelian notions of rationality, etc. Islamic thinkers were generating that kind of a knowledge, which was influencing the birth of European modernity. How is Islam in opposition to Europe? They themselves were part of it, the Andalusian tradition as such, Cordoba, Seville, all places, and their linkage with North Africa for that matter, and so on and so forth. So there is this image of Islam which is typically, connected with certain political movements that emerged in the 20th century. Starting from the Muslim Brotherhood, but more so about the ISIS or the Taliban and things like that. Al-Qaeda and so on. That's not the whole of Islam, a Muslim world or Islam. So whether it is the interpretation of the texts of Islam by various scholars and even political figures, they interpret it very differently. And another movement, Rashid Ghanouzi's interpretation of Islam is different. Very different from a Saudi cleric's interpretation of Islam. And therefore, this violence that I was talking about, the epistemic violence that I was talking about, is this kind of extreme, monolithic, understanding of Islam in order that an enemy can be created. So, the kind of every Muslim then becomes a terrorist, isn't it, in this discourse? It is a discursively constructed idea. A person believing in Islam in any part of the world have nothing to do with that kind of descriptions, isn't it? But these descriptions these discourses are so powerful because it is created for these kinds of purposes with imperialist kind of intent and purposes. Then that discursively constructed reality becomes a reality.
Realities.
So Iraq can be attacked because the whole notion is these terrorists have to be
We can take Gaza like that.
Gaza. The whole description about Palestinians and their movements. Well, take the case of anything. Afghanistan, this was done. So whether the reality of the Muslim people and these discourses do not match.
Yes.
So people find these application of these discourses and finding exact people according to those descriptions and treating everyone like that. This is the danger that is being created. Extreme kind of violence in terms of journalistic, descriptions, academic descriptions, in the creation of values and knowledges. That was a big problem.
I was listening to you, one of your speeches, and you said that we need a softer India. And also, you're saying that humanity needed to be in the forefront when you talk about international affairs. For that, you brought in some examples from your experience in Egypt. In a world, as you mentioned, there like majoritarianism and the governments of majoritarian leaders coming into power. How is it possible? Because today itself, when Prime Minister Modi was visiting Donald Trump, the whole narrative was building around in social media was Modi as a powerful leader, while the reality on the ground is that Trump is trying his level best to put forward all the tariffs on India and trying to increase the tariffs also. He's talking about reciprocal tariffs. So where does this idea of humanity and the softer countries we can place, we can talk about?
I think that reference is basically to what I was speaking about in terms of what Professor Anandamurthy was saying.
Yes.
When he came to Delhi, that was his last visit to Delhi. He was undergoing dialysis, etc. And then in between he came. That was 2014, when everyone was talking about the requirement to have a strong government, a strong leader to come to power. That wish was already expressed, and we all know who is going to come to power by that time. So he said, I came to Delhi to tell the nation that this quest for a strong India is something that I really fear about, because that kind of a strong India, destroys all of its diversity. I wonder what he was using a supple India. I want a supple India, a flexible India, where its federalism, its languages, its religious traditions, its diversity as such can survive. Nobody is putting everything together in a violent, forceful manner to create a strong India. The strength of India lies in these kinds of diversity.
Yes.
And it has to be, its leadership has to be, its culture has to be receptive to its diversity. So this kind of a call to the nation coming from a writer of his stature, that's a writer's wish, actually. This realpolitik calculations of states and leaderships are something entirely different, So what happens is that, instead of our political leaders expressing India's own great strength as its diversity and its variety of religions, languages and cultures, various ways of living, and so on, instead of projecting that as what India really is, you want to have a state which is militarily very assertive, extreme, ideologically far right, masculine kind of state. So you have the antithesis of a supple India in real political terms happening in front of it. That in itself is, we have seen that kind of concentration of power. This wish for a strong leader, many people you may, you have heard it from the streets, isn't it? We want a military rule. So that, to what extent democratic ideas and principles have influenced our own political ideas as such. This strong state, you remember when the NDA, led by BJP, when it was campaigning in 2014 election, its major plank was, its slogan was minimum government, maximum governance. I think you remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
government.
Where does that come from? That comes from the typical neoliberal slogan of minimum government, but maximum government. I've been talking about this for long, much before this government coming to power, etc. On neoliberalism as such. Neoliberalism assumes a minimum government with respect to markets, isn't it? Don't interfere in free trade argument and so on and so forth. But historically, what was happening? For minimum government thesis to be implemented in the economic sense, a maximum government was installed. In Chile, for example, Allende was removed and General Pinochet, a military dictator, was installed. In order that minimum government works, okay? This is true with Reagan, Thatcher, in established democracies. That was what was done. Strong leaders. So Indian transformation along those lines was arguing for a strong leader, where you have the market forces having all its say. We called it crony capitalism, and the Ambanis and the Adanis and so on and so forth. So my idea is that this minimum government thesis has the unsaid aspect of it. That is a maximum government, a militaristic, strong, repressive government as far right, culturally uniforming, the kind of, one-dimensional culture and things of that.
In your entire career, most part you were in Delhi, and you've been part of Jamia Millia Islamia and JNU, and then before that you go in Mahatma Gandhi University. So you have seen political events like Sikh riots and Gujarat riots and the emergence of BJP. When they first came to power in 1998 and then again in 1999 and then in 2024. And now we have a government which is with a continuity, like a 3-time government. And obviously, many call it people's mandate, and BJP itself call it people's mandate. There are people who are agitated because of what BJP is doing or BJP's in their politics and the repercussions we see to the minorities or in India's economy or to the poor, and where is India headed in that sense?
The sad thing is that, at least in the immediate future, it's not a good prognosis that I can provide. But, we know what happened, at least in the long term, to extreme ideologies of the kind that we see and that kind of centralized governments, etc. But that's a long-term thing. Here again, the political transformation of India that I witnessed, the anti-Sikh riot in my life, I was a student in Delhi at that time. In my life, I've not seen that many people, lashes lying on the road. In Trilokpuri, Vindan, a friend of mine and myself, to actually witness this kind of thing. For the first time, I saw the underbelly of Indian democracy, what it can do to its minorities. You know what happened in Gujarat after that. So in Delhi, after the anti-Sikh riots, in the next elections, people like H.K. Bhagat got elected with some 4 lakhs votes. That is the kind of benefits you reap if you kill like that.
Even Titler and Sajjan Kumar, both.
Yes, Sikh widows with whom I worked for some time told me these names, Kebal, Sajjan Kumar in particular. I have my notes even now of these women telling me those stories. That was a terrible kind of incident in the history of the nation itself, and for me personally, witnessing those things. And then the Babri Masjid movement has such, these Rath Yatras and other things, the kind of polarization that it has created in India, and the growth of BJP as a political party following that, and so on and so forth. India's rightward turn over these periods of time was happening in front of our eyes, even though people like me were involved in at least sensitizing what part of society we could do that, even going to small towns and villages and telling people that this is really what's happening. So one could see that consolidation coming up. As an academic, I look at the nature of transformation of democracies itself as a very significant area where we should, at least those who are interested in, understanding democratic theory, etc. Illiberal democracies, is the norm of the day across the world, as you know. Not liberal democracy, so illiberal democracy. What happens is, in my understanding, the kind of democratic processes that we have now actually enable us to elect our own dictators. Democratic processes culminating in an actually democratically elected dictatorship. So you have the antithesis of democracy happening through democratic process. We have reached such a stage across the globe. India is a typical example of that. And therefore, our rethinking should be on what happens to democracies in the very idea of it and the processes through which that was historically done. And this neoliberal context that we have discussed, minimum government and maximum government as a corollary to that. So that has a lot to do with this election of dictatorships. And democracies, established democracies like the United States, Britain, India is the largest democracy undergoing this kind of a change. But see the United States and Britain and so on. Their activities in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, there's the old thesis by Immanuel Kant, democratic peace idea, that democracies do not fight war against each other. This is a liberal dictum. But it is these established democracies that have killed actually millions of people in our midst. This is precisely what happens to democracies, whether people have control over their states. Iraq war was fought on a flimsy lie, isn't it? Yeah. And a long historically formulated Islamophobic Orientalist ideology. Yes. But the reason provided was a lie. But you can kill so many people. And who is doing it? Not only dictatorships here, everywhere killing people. These are much more. The volume of it is huge. This is precisely what kind of democracy that we should have. So our central political question, therefore, now is that these democracies create these dictatorships, and we have only democracy as an answer to dictatorships. Yes. So it's a very big contradiction in itself. So we cannot say that we don't want democracy. Maybe we have to say we want a different kind of democracy. And what is its form? How can we prevent the emergence of dictatorships through democratic means? Many things we have to discuss. People who are working on politics, international politics in particular, have a duty to do that and have a much more intense debates on this. Yeah. So that at least we understand what's happening and we can somehow intervene and transform the direction in which different states in the world are undergoing at this moment. Because everyone is worried about the very election of Donald Trump now is that many such governments exist across the world. And we are no exception.
Related to that, and we've been part of academics for more than 40 years. for decades. And now what we see in our country is that especially central universities like JNU, Delhi University, and Jamia Millia, is being taken over by a particular idea, an ideology, and recruitments, and in some allegations are there even admissions are happening on the base of what the government wants. A major taking over of educational institutions happening in the process, what we see now. You being an academic and fought several battles with the right-wing ideology. I mean, again, how it's going to affect our entire knowledge system and generational values and everything.
Yeah, this is a very significant thing. The right wing has created such a situation where, it's not that politicization of the academic realm was not happening earlier, but it has gone to such extents now that, several social groups are excluded altogether from recruitments, from education as such, not only as teachers but as students, as you mentioned. The chances for higher education are restricted in several ways. One important change is extreme centralization of higher education system in the country. You could see that the University Grants Commission is asking every university in the country to follow a particular pattern and threatening university acts and statutes. If you don't change that according to the UGC directives, you will be blacklisted from universities, recognized universities. You will not get funds.
And taking the state's rights of universities.
Yes. That is where the whole federal system, education in the concurrent list, that idea is no more valid. That the states hold on education, particularly on higher education, has been reduced to such extent that it has no influence at all. Appointment of vice chancellors, the kind of selection committees that, as a result of that comes to the universities. So even if your state is not ruled by the ruling party at the center, your appointments will happen according to their whims and fancies.
Yes.
So this kind of a situation, this no regard to federalism as such. And so this is basically not only a question in the educational field, this is a political question. Whether Indian states have authority according to a federal imagination of our politics and constitution that we have, and they find themselves now succumbing to this kind of diktats from above. Jawaharlal Nehru University, for example, JNU is formed through an act of Indian Parliament. University Grants Commission is also formed under an act of Indian Parliament. Is one having total authority over the other? They have their own independence of action. As I said, if there is a big conflict between the two, it has to be negotiated. But it's not like that now. JNU used to have that kind of relative autonomy for itself. It doesn't want to have that anymore. It totally submits to the university grants, as if it's a body that has full control over institutions like JNU. It all depends upon, whether you want to really, deny the whole academic community a university's own autonomy. Without that kind of an academic autonomy, how can you function? When lots of struggles were happening in JNU, a colleague of mine and myself wrote an article in the Indian Express at that point of time. There's a cop in my class. Teachers are, they started self-censor. You cannot speak out. You cannot have a political analysis of your own. They may not be there physically, but it functions as such. So this kind of an atmosphere of complete control, state powers, no value for concurrent list idea in the constitution. Nothing. That centralization, which goes along with the kind of idea that we have discussed earlier, of a strong state and
maximum governments.
yeah. So what happens is that if you don't have such and such courses that they want to teach, and you will not get funds. Who is determining the research agenda of a university? Now, is it the autonomous academic decision anymore? Or is there a broader agenda that's placed to which every university has to agree with? It's a very critical moment in the history of education in general, higher education in particular, at this moment. It's of grave concern. As somebody who has seen relative autonomy, and it has, in India, it has never been a fuller autonomy for academic endeavor, but at least you could assert it and gain it to a large extent. Our own writings and agendas were not determined by the state, by any means. That critical space was always there. That's the beauty of education, isn't it, of the field of knowledge, where you may always have systems supporting intellectuals and others, but you always have the possibility of critical viewpoints and vision, isn't it? So that realm is now slowly diminishing.
You have seen the rise of political left in the country, like during the first UPA or second UPA, and also the left parties ruling in Tripura, West Bengal, and Kerala. But now everyone is saying that there is no left if it's not for Kerala, and no left in Bengal, not in Tripura, but anywhere. What has caused the fall of what we can, if we can call it fall, the fall of left, and what is the future of left in Kerala?
That's a big question. I've never been, very pally with established left parties or organizations.
Yeah, I was talking
You
about
can
the
always call
the
us
political.
broadly
Yeah.
left in the political sense, in a broad global sense of the word. What I think is that whether such parties and organizations would imagine a real alternative, or were they totally submerged in a caste-ridden, capitalist, semi-capitalist, semi-feudal kind of India, whether there were real critique of these kinds of dominant tendencies in our society, of capitalism, of feudal things, of caste system, etc. So in many fields, you could see that the kind of insights, especially the transformation of some of the insights several intellectuals had, but transformation of that into politics, whether that really happened or not. In many places, it did not happen. Mere controlling the state governments, etc.,
Yes.
did not transform societies in a big manner. A large-scale land reform, for example, or a real, genuine attempt at annihilation of caste in India. So many very significant questions that arise. Many people tried to address these questions, I will not say, but as governments, were they really keen on that, or therefore whether they were successful in doing that? You won't get a very good positive answer on that. The other thing is that, the whole idea of, Indian society's own nature, it is a very fertile ground for these extreme right-wing ideologies to flourish. The left is a casualty, if it's a genuine left, in that kind of thing. Because we have one of the most hierarchical societies, because of its caste system in the world, one of the most hierarchical societies. In that kind of a system, those at the top of the hierarchy, or those who socialize into it from little bit below, etc., control social and political power. There are constitutional provisions to challenge it through reservation, through many other things. But to what extent? So whether ideologically we could really dismantle this kind of a hierarchy to any meaningful extent, I doubt, to a large extent. And sometimes the left organizations, etc., viewed anti-caste movements with some skepticism, even though there are several left leaders in the past who participated who have struggled with anti-caste movements. But in general, there was a skepticism towards that, isn't it? It was not, there's always, and there was a criticism of the left from Dalit organizations, etc. For obvious reasons. Because this hierarchical system, the social system which enabled Indian politics to have this kind of a leadership that we see today, that core of the system is not challenged. This has been, caste has been a very significant element where the left could not really have a hold on that. This is one major thing. You know, a democratic process which has that critical element that I was talking about, that it should not result in fascism, etc. A democratic praxis of that kind, to what extent our societies are democratized in that? What is the nature of whether we have a civil society in which citizens can have a clear-cut dialogue? Because from where you are coming determines where you are in the hierarchy, isn't it? Not in an open debating position, asserting one's own citizenship as equal citizens of a country. That is still not available for a majority of the people of the country. So this, I think, is a huge issue. You know, lots of movements have been happening. There were sacrifices of various kinds, creating realms where in some places, in Kerala, for example, it exists, where local libraries, people coming together, the public, state or aided schools and colleges where people from different walks of life and belief systems can come together, cultural arenas where you can build, think about an alternative system as such. Through the reforms that we see, some of these common spaces, secular spaces that we have, are not expanding. Sometimes it is being captured by right-wing forces. That is also received. This is a major kind of problem that I see. Also, the stronghold of extreme right-wing ideologies is to such extent that whether you belong to Congress or a left parties or BJP or anything else, they all have similar kind of views. Kind of Islamophobia they share. Sometimes you don't know, they belong to different parties, but the kind of RSS mentality some of these people have across political parties. Whether there is a cultural resistance to it from the left parties itself, of their cadres behaving like this is a big question. It's not only their question, it's a general social and political question for everyone to look into. True with the Congress party, true with any other party. I've seen now, earlier at least we had a confidence that, Muslim intellectuals and others won't go to that side. Now you've seen in Delhi what's happening. Now you have the Muslim Manch, and lots of intellectuals are going towards the BJP field, and they're getting positions in the academic field, etc. So, cutting across political parties, etc., you have the assertion of this a great element of Hindutva ideology creeping into all of them. So it's a task not only for the left, for everyone, so-called secular parties, to really be cautious and try to work at the grassroots level in a dialogue with one's own members and cadres. But whether you have intellectuals in such political leaderships who really understand this kind of danger that their own parties are now undergoing. That's important.
It was a great conversation with Professor AK Ramakrishnan. We have covered several issues ranging from West Asian to global politics to geopolitics to Indian politics. And Timeline thanks him for his time and all the good insights he provided with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.